Welcome to this chapter on rebuilding of the jf017E transmission. This chapter is divided into 3 parts: teardown, subassemblies, and reassembly. In this part, you will learn about the reassembly of the unit. My name is Jared Warren, and I'll be your host for this chapter. It's a great day to fix transmissions, so let's get started. Alright, so in the other section, we did the pulleys, put the pulleys on the rear cover so it's ready to go. You don't want to put the lube tubes in yet. Lube tubes, the steel ones are fine in the case, but the aluminum ones that go into the plastic chain guides, you don't put those in yet. So on the case side, you want to blow some solvent or brake clean down in these lube tubes here and blow them out, make sure they're clean. You want to grease it, the case and put the O-ring here. You can do that later too, but I always like to do it now. We're going to have to pull this rear cover back off, and we'll show you that. You want to make sure the park rod is lined up. You want to put the park rod all the way down in the low position, and then you go ahead and don't use any sealant at this time. Just take this case half and flip the case half over onto the pulleys. I found that to be the easiest. Again, no sealant yet. We're going to have to take this rear cover back off. Okay, so now we have the pulleys loaded into the main case. We have a thrust washer here. Shiny side is facing up. And then we can do our pump. Bolt our pump in. The Allen bolts here, 15.2 foot-pounds, and the one that goes on the outside, silicone sealant on this bolt on the outside, and that one goes to 22.1 foot-pounds. The bolt here is on, goes in about right here on the bell housing, or on the main case section. So then we got the gear train. So I like to take assembly lube and place the thrust bearings onto the hub. Both shiny sides of the bearing go towards the hub, so each thrust washer glue onto this hub, shiny side to the hub. Then go ahead and put the hub into your forward drum. Spin it down into place, make sure all the clutches are in. Then go ahead and assemble the planet into the sun gear and the hub. And make sure that's all the way down. Then I take this whole assembly and drop it in to the main case. Make sure that the sealing ring here on the input shaft is in place before you do this. And this thrust washer is shiny side up here too. So then you can drop this whole section down in, spline it into your reverse brake clutches here. Now there is one bearing that's selective. This thicker bearing is selective here on the input. We did that in the other chapter, but this is where you take up your end play. So make sure you keep that one separate. And here's our end play. So once you get your forward clutch hub and all that in, go ahead and set up your H gauge across the case. And then your gauge, put it down against the bearing, and then flip it over onto the stator, or the support, and you want to measure between that rod and your pump stator. Here's the selective shims. There's 2 different types of bearings here. The first type is a one-piece bearing. It's smaller and rides right where the gauge is on this picture. The second type is larger, and it measures will touch right here on the support, so it'll go outside the rings. It's a lot bigger, and it's a 2-piece bearing. So this race right here is different thicknesses, and here's the part numbers. Alright, so we'll go ahead and drop the support down into the trans and Make sure the sealing rings are good on the back here, lubed into place. And then we'll want to torque the support bolts to 14 foot-pounds. We're going to put them all in except these over in this location. Make sure your linkage pin is here in the case on the linkage shaft. And then put the, I call it the wheelie bar, but the parts spring, the detent spring. And go ahead and torque that bolt down to 70 inch-pounds. It's a good time at this point when you're doing with the linkage. Make sure the linkage is nice and free and still moving. You don't want this linkage all bound up. It will break easily putting that rear cover on it with the pulleys if it's not lined up right. So you always want to make sure you check your linkage after you this step, and then also after we put the rear cover back on later on down the road. Alright, put a 3-tab thrust washer here. Go ahead and bolt your oil slinger or baffle over the pump over in this area. Go ahead and tighten those bolts down to 52 inch-pounds. That holds the baffle in. Then we're going to go over and put this bracket in place. And these 2 stator bolts, tighten them down to 14 foot-pounds. And we have 2 short bolts, 12mm heads, and this bracket here for the pump support. We put it over here from the support to the pump, and we torque those down to 14 foot-pounds. There should be a metal seal with a rubber lip on it. You're going to put that into the case here, and then install a new filter. The filter side of the filter has a rubber side. Put the rubber side down into the seal, and then put your filter cover on and tighten the bolts down to 100 inch-pounds. Alright, so now we're going to put the chain and the pump together. So on the drive sprocket, there's 2 sections. I classify this as a wide section right here. So between where the chain rides and the edge is wide. Compared to this side, it's narrow. So from here to the chain teeth to the outside here is narrow. So this wide side goes towards the sprocket. So the wide, right here you also have a wide area. It goes towards the drive sprocket. This has a narrow area where it faces up, where the thrust bearing surface is. The chain had a dark link on it that faces you when you're putting it together. And then the driven sprocket has a bearing on one side and then it's covered up on the other. This right here is correct on the right hand side. It's the only way you can put it in. So we put that down in here. Snap ring right here, you got to spread the snap ring while this goes down to allow the bearing to go in. Make sure it pops into place. Drop your differential down in and put some pre-lube these bearings, and put your transfer gear and pinion in. Lube those bearings also. Make sure you're checking for pits and worn marks on these teeth. So now we go over to the front bell housing area. You want to clean this area out real good underneath the shield. Put your shield in, torque them down to 70 inch-pounds. You want to blow this tube out with air and brake clean. And there is no thrust washer that rides on this side of that gear. So it is normal for that drive sprocket gear to ride right on the front bell housing. So the all-wheel drive models don't have a seal here. Two-wheel drive models do. You want to get some anaerobic sealer. This is what I use, the Permatrex gasket maker. Works real well. Some people say that the silicone or the RTV is not good with the CVT fluid. I know there's quite a few people that's used it recommend to get the anaerobic sealer though. Go ahead and put this cover on, the chain cover on, and then apply sealant all the way to around the case itself, and then inside you want to apply sealant right here, which rides right here. It seals this bolt hole up so we don't have a front seal leak. You'll want to put the case on and torque all the bolts to 33 foot-pounds. Install the O-ring on the input shaft and lubricate it. And then we can do some air tests. You want to use about 40 psi or so. You can use forward clutch tap right here, forward tap. Here's the reverse tap. Primary and secondary pulleys, it's kind of hard to check them just because of the way they are. They should be fairly sealed up. You're not going to get the chain to move all the time when you're air testing these, which is normal. But I like to get used to air testing the pulleys so you can tell when you folded a seal or the seal got cut when you're pressing the pulleys together or something. So it's a good practice to get into air checking them, but they're not as tight as you think a lot of times on these CVTs. You want to put your reverse seal here in the case. Put a new seal on your wiring harness here. Go ahead and put this case half, or the connector in the case. Put the wire retainer on the outside. Go ahead and drop your valve body into place. Make sure the wires don't get pinched in between here. You don't want to pinch the wires and get solenoid codes, that kind of stuff. So here is the location. Check that. Make sure it's free. The A bolts are all 54 millimeters long, and they go in the locations marked A. A B bolt right here is 44 millimeters long. And you have your filter bracket. Bolts right down here. Plug in the wiring harness. Put an O-ring on the filter. There's a couple different filters. The all-wheel drive has a long snout on it for the deeper pan. Two-wheel drive has like a flatter pan. Go ahead and put the filter into place. And you see here you're going to have an A bolt length, a B bolt length, and then the A length here. So you got two shorts and one longer bolt to hold this filter in place. Linkage. You have your manual valve here. Put your linkage arm into the manual valve. You can flip this linkage arm over either way. It's the same. Go ahead and tighten your nut down to 16 foot-pounds. And you see this filter, this is the all-wheel drive filter, the four-wheel drive filter. Now it's roughly 3 inches long or so. Here's a better picture of the all-wheel drive fan and filter. Go ahead and put your pan gasket on. 70 inch-pounds. Drain plugs torqued to 25 foot-pounds. Now we got the pan on, valve body's all in, case half's all glued together, input shafts, all that is together in the front. So now what we need to do is we need to pull this rear cover back off. So remove the bolts you had to hold the seal retainer or the bearing retainer in place, pull those back out, and pull this rear cover off. And we're going to install the lube tubes. So you see right here the round section, it faces the chain. Flat section faces towards the center. And one side you have milled flats on it. So right here is milled flat and milled flat. They need to pop down over those tubes, and they need to be twisted in where the milled flats are all the way down. So you see the lube tubes are in here right here. Use your studs again for alignment. Go ahead and screw those into the bearing retainers. Make sure your shim and that sealing ring's in good shape. Apply some anaerobic sealer to the case. And then you'll want to torque the retainer bolts, all the 20 foot-pounds, and then torque the rear case bolts to 33 foot-pounds. Well, that's about it. Besides all the brain switch and speed sensors and all that, but go ahead and put those on, and you got the transmission done. This will conclude the reassembly part of the jf017E transmission. We want to thank you for participating in Virtual Training Solutions powered by ATRA. Until next time, let's keep fixing transmissions together.